This material is made available to you by or on behalf of the University of Melbourne under Section 113P of the Copyright Act 1968. It may be subject to copyright. For more information, visit the University Copyright website.
Alright, shall we make a start for today? Welcome back to uni. How was your semester break? Was it non-existent? That's right, that makes the two of us. I spent it setting your exam. But yes, let's get started for today. Today our topic's on intro. Can everyone hear me just fine? I feel like I'm a bit soft. Can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay, good. Today our topic's on corporate real estate management and facilities management. Some of you may have already done the subject on corporate real estate management. That's part of your Masters of Property course. But we're going to talk about that a little bit, and then we'll talk about facilities management as well, how you differentiate the two of them, because some academics argue that CRE and FM are the same thing, right? So we'll spend some time differentiating them. And then after that, we'll spend some time looking at some case studies within the CRE and FM field, okay? So starting off, what is corporate real estate? Does anyone want to guess? Any guesses or examples?
This is the corporate views real estate as our strategy. It's normally up to 25% invest in real estate.
Okay, good. So using real estate as part of your strategy, because knowing that real estate is quite a big part of your investment or cost as running an organization, right? Very, very good. So we're just going to review real estate as an asset. Sorry, I didn't know that I got these animations in here. Some people say that, it's a place where an organization live or occupy, almost like a residency. So we occupy an apartment, let's say, right? But an organization has to occupy a space in order to run its business. Okay, or even as an investment, real estate, obviously we all know that people invest in real estate, even as a vehicle for development to make money out of it. So for example, land lease, Metricon, etc. That's where they do it as a vehicle for development. And the last one is what we're focusing on, all right? Real estate as an organizational, operational asset. So not so much real estate as an investment, but how can real estate help facilitate what the organization does better? All right. Oh, yeah, those are just corporate views on real estate. Let's move on. So this slide helps us to define what is corporate real estate, okay? So corporate real estate is basically any real estate that houses the productive or business activities of an organization. The real estate can be owned or leased, and the key focus here that you have to remember is that it's where the primary business of the organization is not real estate, okay? So for example, when Land Lease invests in a piece of land to develop and then resell after that, that's not considered their corporate real estate. Their corporate real estate would be, say, the office that their people work out of. Okay, so in short, it's the property you have to do business, and the key thing you have to remember is that CRE takes on an occupier view. Okay, so I've attached those few images there. That just shows you how CRE can look very different depending on what the business actually is. Okay, the first one up here, an office, like we said, right? That's where it houses, say, administrative tasks for land lease. In terms of retail, this could be where people sell their products. That could be their corporate real estate. For example, if you're Mandarina Duck. Okay. Obviously, these are normally leased. If you're within sort of, an industrial sort of business, it might be where your warehouse is. Okay. What is CRE? So continuing, CRE can be freehold and leasehold interest. So in Australia, most things are freehold, but in some countries like Singapore and Hong Kong, even if you own the land, it's maybe only a 99-year lease or 50-year lease, okay? It can be the land, buildings, and other improvements. Can be special purpose facilities, so for example, a dairy factory, okay? Can even be air rights. So air rights is not as established in Australia, but it's quite established in countries like USA and Europe. And it's increasingly more important when a city densifies. Okay, so when density increases and we start running out of space, then people start looking into air rights, what sort of air rights they can purchase, and that basically increases the density within that building, all right? We'll come back to that a little bit. And people can actually buy air rights. Okay, do you know why people might want to buy air rights? So air rights is basically anything on top of, say, a current building. So anything on top of this building is technically air rights.
They can get unblocked view from your building, for example.
Good, spot on. That's exactly what Donald Trump did to Trump Towers. He actually bought air rights of buildings surrounding it so that there is no building blocking the view of Trump Towers, okay? Another example, well, the same thing's actually done in Melbourne. So there's an apartment in South Yarra. They actually bought the air rights of the buildings in front of them so that they have an unblocked view of the Yarra River, okay? Because the Yarra River is which makes those apartments really valuable. So if someone builds something in front of them, then there goes their view and value of their property, okay? Mineral rights is quite the contrary. Mineral rights is basically whatever is underneath the land. So a lot of people think that when we buy a piece of land, so let's say if you decide to buy a piece of land in Bendigo or something, and then you might find that there's some gold underneath your land, right? What happens there is actually most of these mineral rights under your land, it actually still belongs to the crown, okay? So you can't actually decide to just bring in like excavators and excavate the entire land even though it belongs to you to try to find gold, petroleum, etc. You actually have to go back to the crown and buy these rights off them, okay? So even though you own the land, I think it's only up to a certain number of meters downwards. Anything below that belongs back to the crown. And it's a very highly risky business. You never know how much minerals is under the land until you actually excavate and do more testing and investigation. Most of the time you won't get to buy the air rights unless you have a whole plan put out for them. So it has to be a plan on how you would restore the land after that. You can't just dig up the land and then leave it as it is and go. You actually have to propose how you're going to restore the land after you've mined it, all right? So all of this could be CRE, all right? One example of air rights in Collingwood here. So what they actually did was they bought the air rights on top of this block, which is 68 Oxford Street in Collingwood. What they actually wanted to do was, I think it was some sort of heritage building, but obviously refurbished. So what they wanted to do was they wanted to build penthouses on top. So sort of on top here, that's what they got the air rights for, okay? The air rights cost them $1 million, okay? So not cheap, but then obviously each of the penthouse is worth quite a fair bit, especially in a location like Collingwood. So as a city densifies, this will end up being what the government or developers would try to do in order to build more units around the city to accommodate the population. All right, so who has CRE? Basically, anyone who does business will have CRE, okay? So like we said, the retailing center, it could be like a Mandarina Duck store in Myer or David Jones or something. Manufacturing sector, their CRE would be, say, their offices or sites. Financial and other service sectors, even things like ATMs are considered CRE for them. Education sector, this lecture theatre itself is a corporate real estate for the University of Melbourne, all right? even if you decide to start a business from home and locate your business from home, work from home, that's a CRE decision that you have decided to make yourself, okay? So we're just gonna go through some examples now. This is Singtel's, ooh, look at the animation. Sorry, oops. Let's just click on the first two first then. This one here is Singtel's head office. This is Nokia's head office. And this is Coca-Cola's head office. Okay, not sure why it does that. But you can sort of tell these are quite dated pictures. These days you won't really find them associated with such dated looking buildings. It's all about what sort of message does my building convey to my investors, to my clients, right? It's all branding, and most people like to locate in very premium sort of buildings. So for example, NAP, they locate in very premium buildings because it's all branding for them. We want to show people that we as a brand were associated with being premium. And we want to generate investors' confidence, all right? I'm sure you feel a lot more confident if NAP was located in this building compared to these buildings, right? This building tells you that they might be going broke soon, and that's why they're located in a 1960s or 1970s building. Whereas buildings like that protrudes confidence, tells you that they're continuously investing in their future and in their people, right? So we'll come back to NAP a little bit later. But just more corporate real estate examples, even from a local government or sort of public perspective. Okay, so every local government also has corporate real estate. For example, a library, a pavilion, even aged care accommodation for people who can't afford to stay on their own or to stay in a special purpose facility, even their aquatic center. That's all considered a local government's corporate real estate, all right? So even though it sounds fairly simple, like obviously a local government has all of these, it's not that simple because it comes down to various types of decisions that we'll go through soon. But things like location, we've already said. What sort of branding and image do we have? For example, if you're a financial institution and you're not located along Collins Street, what does that say about you, right? People would just be like, oh, you're not a big boy, right? You're just a small boy. Or even locating on Wall Street. Things like considering your employees. Do you have local employees in the area? Is the place that you choose to locate convenient for your employees to travel to? The worst thing is you don't want to locate your office in Dandenong, and then no one wants to travel there to work for you, even though you're paying them a high pay, because it's just super inconvenient for them, right? And the other thing to think about is things like cost effectiveness. How much is it going to cost me? So cost versus benefit. This model here basically helps us to differentiate where CRE sits compared to all the other sort of property careers that we've already discussed, all right? So it's nothing amusing, but it just helps us to place where CRE, asset management, and FM, etc. are. So this is your supply chain of real estate, in which you should all be very familiar with, right? Developers, construction, service providers, they'll all, you know, buy land, develop it, build something premium for us, and owners and investors are the one that funds it, right? And then whoever who needs to use real estate, they're the real estate demand side, right? Occupants, occupiers, and that's where CRE sits. Okay, so CRE actually sits within the demand side, whereas most of the other things that we've learned, like FMPM, asset management, they all sit more or less in the supply side. Okay, so that's a big differentiator. When we talk about corporate real estate, we're thinking from the occupier's perspective. So for example, we're thinking from NAP's perspective. What can we do about real estate that would help us more productive as an organization, all right? Whereas if you're an asset manager, you're more or less sitting here, right, in the supply side. You're thinking, what can I do best for my investors, who are my clients, to maximize their return, and at the same time, By investing more in better facilities, that will help me to attract better tenants. So that's more asset management. Facilities management, we'll talk a bit more about it later, but facilities management focuses on helping owners to run the building to keep their tenants happy. So it's more a daily thing, like are my lifts operational, are they up to date in their maintenance, etc., right? Property management is also towards the supply side because it looks at managing, say, several buildings within a portfolio, keeping on top of facilities manager, making sure the building is fully leased out, checking for vacancies, etc. So most of the others all sit within real estate supply, with CRE being the only one that sits within real estate demand from an occupier's perspective, okay? So that's a big differentiator in identifying the difference between them. So why is corporate real estate important, okay? The key answer to that is because real estate costs a lot of money for occupiers, and it can contribute to the organization as well. So let's just start one by one. So all of these points are just sort of reason reports to tell you why it's valuable. On average, in 2015 to 2016, the top 20 Australian companies have approximately $13 billion in PPE assets on their balance sheet. CRE is estimated to be approximately 25% of corporate assets. Corporate premises represents up to 10% of revenue and 30% of expenditure. That's quite a fair bit, okay, 30%. And real estate costs are generally the second highest non-interest expense after personnel, employees, or your, what we call our capital, all right? Okay, an alternative view on CRE's connection to the business. Some people don't actually view CRE as core to a business. They actually view it as secondary. So then their perspective is that CRE is not that important after all. It's just whatever that houses my business, right? So some organizations actually move towards this perspective of outsourcing CRE. They might decide to, a lot of organizations in the early 2000s, before that they always owned their own buildings, but then they sort of started moving towards leasing buildings instead of owning, so that they have less property on their balance sheet. And at that point in time, when you lease buildings, you can actually move all your property assets off your balance sheet so that they're not accounted for. And then from an investor's perspective, it looks a bit better because, owning a building doesn't actually help you to directly generate income, okay? But since the global financial crisis in 2007, the Basel Committee has actually made changes such to the financial accounting standards to make sure that all leases are accounted for on the balance sheet. So these days, there's not as much advantage in moving things off balance sheet because you still have to kind of declare it, all right? And so we start talking about why should someone outsource CREM or not, right? One sort of big argument for not outsourcing CREM is that even though you don't have to manage it by yourself right now, eventually in the future, when you decide to insource CREM and manage it by yourself again, you start to lose the expertise that you need to manage CRE by yourself, okay? Some other common things that organizations like to move offshore are things like call centers and customer support. I know that's one thing that Australians do not really like because sometimes they call up and the connection's bad, you don't understand what the people on the other side are saying. But then when you suddenly decide to move that back in-house, it will cost you a lot of money, all right? Okay, so CREM's ethos. CRE is connected to the business, and things like place, location, workspace, they make significant contributions to business outcomes, all right? Let's see what I've written here. Right, so I'm sure many of you have thought of this before. How many of you have thought of, you walk past this great business idea, let's say a food business on Swanston Street or not Swanston Street, somewhere that's not great and you think to yourself, wow, this business would really thrive if only it was located elsewhere, right? And that in itself is a CRE decision. That business decided to locate somewhere potentially because it's cheap instead of elsewhere that is much more expensive but has great foot traffic, okay? Or sometimes you might even walk past a business that is shutting down and you can't figure out why because it's in a great location, right? So for example, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Berkeley Square, but if you were here a few years back a few years, there was actually a Kentucky Fried Chicken right outside Berkeley Square, in which everyone would have thought it's a great location, right? Great foot traffic, great sort of residential demographics, but then it didn't survive, it shut down, right? And so then you have to then explore why did it shut down. It could be various reasons, right? So these are some things to then understand. You gotta understand the business. It could be the management that was in place. It could be the operating model. Maybe people were just throwing chicken around and, you know, people were getting sick from eating their old chicken or chicken that was fried and refried. It could be the strategic environment. Do they know their targeted market? Was McDonald's too big of a competitor for them? Or is it such that the people around there are more into brunch or nice restaurants instead of KFC, right? And understanding the business unit needs. So all of these go into and help you make your CRE decisions on where would be best and what would be the best step for your business. So now we introduce the management of CRE. So defining CREM, the management of CRE to meet business, well, strategic business ends by, no, I don't want to do that. Okay, so management of CRE to meet strategic business ends, focus on strategic management and maximizing the corporate bottom line. All right, so I've attached this picture here because, you know, our triple corporate bottom line is 3 P's, right? Profit, people, planet, aka economic, environmental, and social sustainability, right? So how can we manage real estate such that it will help us to achieve that as a business internally? And why CREM, okay? The real estate's primary value to the organization is not just in its investment value, but how well real estate can help you support the business. One primary way of doing this is aligning your CRE to how the organization actually operates. And this will I know all of this sort of just sounds vague, but this will start to unfold when we go through the case study later, all right? You focus on strategic enabling and adding value to the organization, helping them to better achieve what they can do to ensure business sustainability. So 3 dimensions of sustainability in CREM. So this goes back to that triple bottom line approach of economic, social, and environmental, all right? So CREM helps to ensure economic sustainability because by managing CRE, which is one of our largest expense in an organization, it helps you to control how much we're spending on it, all right? An extreme case of cost cutting in organizations is moving from, say, open plan to hot desking offices. Not sure how many of you have heard of it. Open plan is obviously everyone gets their own desk in an open area, right? Hot desking is basically none of you own your own desk. You get a locker, but we put you in a similar office to an open plan office where everyone shares these tables now, okay? So if you are going to, so if you don't come to work today, other people get to use that space, or even when you go for a meeting, you're expected to clear that desk so that someone else can use that desk, okay? So that's hot desking. We'll talk a bit more about that and compare that to activity-based working as well. In terms of social sustainability, it's getting organizations to slowly think about how can we better design buildings with a better well-being focus so that people who actually come to work can better enjoy the interactions that they encounter and help them to better operate within the building. All right, so giving them what they want, giving them what they need. Environmental sustainability is obviously a very big thing now. Most of you already know, Neighbours, Green Star, and in fact, we actually have Chris coming to talk about environmental sustainability next week. So I'm not going to talk about it too much. But very simple things like location. That can really impact how much greenhouse gases we emit because, for example, if you decide to locate in Dandenong and all of your employees now have to drive to work instead of taking public transport, that significantly changes how much greenhouse gases all of you emit as organization plus its employees, instead of just greenhouse gases from say running the building. All right, so it's thinking about all these small little things. Back many years ago, most for-profit organizations, so organizations that are doing business to make money, most of them only focus on economic, okay? But increasingly, they're all starting to focus on social and environmental, partially because it's to do with corporate social responsibility, part of branding, right? You want to be branded as an organization that takes care of its people and its environment, and you're not just all out there to make money. Most not-for-profit organizations, so say our local government, their main focus is social sustainability. They don't make much money. Obviously, we pay a lot in council rates, but their main focus is social sustainability. What sort of facilities can we provide for our people? Facilities that they can afford, as opposed to making money out of operating a gym, okay? Increasingly, environmental sustainability is gaining traction, especially when it's to do with political parties. In local governments, not so much, because in order to upgrade their building to be environmentally sustainable, it just costs too much money. All right? So CREM's responsibility is basically vested in two sort of levels. The first is portfolio management. So obviously some companies like NAP, they don't just have one building, right? They have a whole portfolio of buildings to take care of. So then when you go into an organization like that, it's thinking about all of the CRE that they have, from offices to their retail sort of channels, their ATMs that they have, thinking about how can we sort of locate to help generate synergy between them all, right? If you're in sort of a smaller organization, they might only have one major corporate real estate or one building. Some law offices only have, say, one story or half a story, right? So not as much CRE to manage, but there's still CRE to manage, right? So then in that level, they're more commonly known as individual property management. And some people tend to confuse that with facilities management, right? Because it's only directed to one individual property, right? And some academics actually argue that FM and CREM is the same thing. But personally, we sort of disagree with this view, which is why we have separate subjects to teach both of these. Because CRE, like we said, makes decisions from an occupier's perspective. The decisions are about properties within the context of an asset that is within a whole real estate market, right? It focuses on externalities holistically, like branding effects from real estate and real estate decisions on surrounding locations. Whereas facilities management is more on the internal, how can I make the building run more smoothly, and mainly just within the building itself. We'll actually talk a bit more about FM as well to better define it. So some functions of CREM, it's not an exhaustive list, but these are the two main things that CREM focuses on. The rest are sort of just minor focuses. The main ones they focus on is strategic planning and workplace creation. It's more of a high-level focus on decision-making compared to FM, right? Like we said, FM is only internally focused on, say, a single building. Like we said earlier, the difference between asset management and CRAM is that asset management acts more from an investor's perspective, whereas CRAM acts from an occupier's perspective, all right? Acting in the best interest of the tenant or the occupant. It's not to say that because obviously with CRAM, some businesses have owner-occupied buildings. So it's not to say that we don't care about investment value, but it's about what can we do to the building to add better value in how we operate as a business, okay? It's not that we're trying to drive investment value down, right? It's just that investment value is not so much the focus of CRAM to get a $% return annually. So CRAM as a strategic organizational resource, sorry, we got to skip to that. Oh wait, no. All right, so CRE as a major strategic organizational resource, we recognize CRE as one of the 5 major infrastructure resources. These are your other common resources. CRE is obviously gaining more traction in recent years compared to previously because organizations suddenly woke up one day and realized that real estate is actually the 2nd or 3rd largest expense compared right after human resources and IT, right? Obviously, IT wasn't that high up on the list because computers did not really exist 20 years ago. But obviously, IT is starting to gain more traction and becoming one of the largest expense in organizations. Sorry, I don't know why my slides just got mixed up. All right, so let's look at CRAM complexity and the environment that we operate in, all right? So roles of CRE in the organizational economy, all of these here are the external environment and contextual issues in which organizations and CRE operate in, all right? Whichever country or even city or state that you go in, taxation regimes can differ, they have different property law. If you decide to outsource, social-cultural dynamics may be very different. So even between Melbourne and Auckland, we have very different cultures, whether it's obvious to you or not. Even in accounting regimes, right? We all follow different accounting standards, have different periods of reporting, and obviously real estate is something that you have to report to your investors annually, all right? Role of CRE in the organizational economy. So the real estate that we occupy as an organization are normally inputs used to produce an output, okay? So to produce something that is sellable or marketable, to sell and make money. Corporate estate and investment, obviously you guys know that. Real estate is also a commodity because it's necessary to the core organization's operations. And lastly, things like public infrastructure, we've already sort of discussed. These are, for example, say the gym that the local government provides, or even the parks that the local government provides to its people. Some contextual issues, we've sort of covered this, so I'm not going to go through it substantially. Like we said, in every state or country, it all differs. Yeah, I'm just not going to go through it because we've already gone through that. Some possible CRE strategies. If you've done corporate real estate management, this would have come up. So Nurse and Rulex strategies, even though they were written a long time ago, 1993, that one, they're actually a really good source of strategies. They're a good starting point to think of what sort of strategies can we develop for organizations, all right? So do we want to go with occupancy cost minimization, or do we want to go with cost effectiveness? And no one ever goes for cost maximization, okay? That's just not a thing. No one wants to maximize costs and increase expenses. In terms of flexibility, what sort of flexibility do we want to offer? Flexibility can be interpreted from a few perspectives, one of them being real estate flexibility. Obviously, if you lease, you have more flexibility than owning, right? Because obviously, you're on a contract, you can negotiate the contract to your benefit, put options in it, as opposed to owning where you have to pay for large costs like stamp duty, property tax, etc. Another aspect of flexibility you could potentially think of that is slightly related to human resource objectives is flexibility that you offer your employees, things like working from home, working from another site within the organization. Like we said, promote marketing message. For example, Trump Tower buying the air, right? So that everyone can see from 1 mile away that it says Trump, right? So that's part of marketing message. And like we said, organizations like to be associated with being a premium brand as opposed to locating in a 1960s building that shows you that we are broke, we might be going bankrupt soon, and so we don't want to spend on real estate. How can we promote sales and selling processes? So even organizations like Meijer, so they have, well, besides their normal retail sort of sales, they have areas set up for click and collect, right? So that helps to promote selling process because we order whatever we want on our phone. We don't have to walk around the entire shopping center to find it. We just walk to a specific counter, it's packed and it's there for us. Even in terms of logistics, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of, well, that's sort of related to this view here. But even in terms of logistics, for example, Toyota Production sort of program, TPC they call it, where they only stock things as per demand. So they'll never have like 1 million steering wheels in their factory at one point of time. They only get them in when they need it. And that obviously reduces the cost of storage over there for them and the cost of all that inventory sitting there doing absolutely nothing. All right. Obviously facilitating managerial process and knowledge work. So we'll talk a bit about that soon. That's things like activity-based working, providing people with a real estate or workplace that fully supports what they do instead of a one-size-fits-all. All right. Capturing real estate value creation of business. That's kind of what all of this is. But you know, if it's owner-occupied and you own the property, how does setting up this building help us to increase the investment value potentially in the long run? Okay. Like creating an iconic building with very high employee reviews so that eventually when you sell it off, the next person would be super extremely excited to take it on because they don't have to do much and they know that the building works as it is. All right, so let's talk very quickly about FM. That's not fully our focus for today. We've just put it here to help you sort of differentiate FM and CREM a little bit more. All right, so lots of definitions that we've thrown in. These definitions here define facilities management as a field. I've just sort of highlighted the key words, but it's basically a function that integrates people, place, and process within the built environment. And the key message that they're trying to convey here is all very vague, I know, but the key message is that how can we support and improve the primary business activities of our tenants or occupants through the built environment, right? Again, very vague, that could have equally applied to CREM, right? So then we go on to define facilities management as a profession. Again, very similar, it's multidisciplinary, people, place, process, and technology. But the key point is you achieve this by managing the facility that you have in place so that nothing breaks down that will affect the productivity of businesses, okay? So for example, if these projectors here break down, that's not gonna do us any good. That will be super unproductive because you won't be able to understand what I'm saying without any visual display, right? So that's more of FM. To further sort of illustrate it, here are some of their domains of practice. So building operations and technology, we've already said. So things like building information management system, that's kind of in our case study for today. How well does my building perform? Planning the facilities and designing it. So most of you would normally be based in Melbourne School of Design, right? There's obviously a building information management system there that manages the building all the time. It makes sure that the windows open whenever the temperature is at the right temperature outside to help us to save money on electricity to run the air conditioning. So things like that. So when buildings require people to talk to them, that's when it's going to cost a lot more and it requires a lot more FM effort in it than without, okay? Things like maintenance, we've already talked about, administration, calling the right people in at the right time, even things like running building fire drills, that's all FM, all right? They plan that and they run it at the required time. I think you're required to do like 2 fire drills every year or something. So differentiating FM from CREM, we're just gonna go through the evolutions quite quickly. You can sort of tell from these evolutions, CREM is more on the strategic side, all right? So pre-1990s, CREM was involved in site selection for things like industrial plants. So that instantly tells you it's from an occupier's perspective because we're selecting a site for the occupier, all right? Expansion of corporate offices, when we decide that we don't have enough space, we got to expand. Ownership of real estate. Previously, that was a very common way of housing our businesses. You have CRE services provided in-house, sometimes they out-task, and they view CRE as a corporate asset. And then in the 1990s, they realized we are spending way too much money on owning properties. They start to move real estate off the balance sheet by leasing. And so then, you know, that completely drops out from your balance sheet. They start to contract, aka stopped using so many properties and reduce the waste from real estate. We have the rise of IT. Obviously, computers used to be the size of a room, but they're this small now. They start to outsource more real estate services because it costs too much to run in-house. Before they realize that by doing that, you lose your expertise in-house. And they start to view CRE more as a strategic organizational resource. All right, and then in 2000s, you can sort of see CRE is rising up more and more to a strategic sort of perspective. CREM is now viewed as a strategic business partner. How can we incorporate real estate to support the organizational strategy and values? How do I manage it globally? What can I do to my real estate to attract and retain the best talents in the workforce, because that's where we spend the most of our money. In terms of sustainability, what can we do with environmental sustainability that will help create good branding and a more comfortable social environment for our people? And in terms of CRE services, it's how can we form alliances with service providers. So previously, a lot of organizations would just completely outsource their CREM function. They might go to an organization like JLL and say, look, I just want you to do this contract for me. I'm just going to outsource this to you completely. But they're increasingly actually bringing in service providers from, say, JLL into their own organization to work for them full-time. So some people that I know from ANZ, they're actually from JLL, so when they email you, it's always JLL. But these people are actually fully based in ANZ 24/7 for the past 3 or 5 years, and that's basically known as a service alliance, all right? So then you have all of these service providers actually fully integrated into your organization, even though they technically belong to an outsourced company, all right? That's one way of managing it, so that you don't completely lose the in-house expertise of how to do it. The evolution of FM, as you can kind of tell, they used to look quite pathetic, all right? Cleaning lifts and fire alarms, all right? That doesn't sound very attractive. And then in 1980s, more contract sort of services with various facilities. And then in 1990s, they sort of started to outsource more and more. So you would outsource to a cleaning company, a food service company, an admin company, etc. And now in 2000s, we're starting to try to move FM back to a strategic side. So for example, when we design and construct a building, how can we do it more smartly to incorporate FM so that when we finally build the final product, it's not going to cost us too much money to run what we've put into the building, right? We're trying to get them to align so that they fully understand the intentions of how the building was built, and they'll try to operate it to achieve those strategies that we have in place. All right, something that Chris will talk to you a bit more, I reckon. All right, so then we try to differentiate CREM and FM a little bit more. Some of these were repeated from what we had in earlier slides. So like we already said, CREM is normally a portfolio and FM is normally a single property, similar to asset management and portfolio management, right? Except CREM is more from a demand side and AM and portfolio management is from a supply side. CREM focuses on the property in the business, whereas FM focuses on how the facility can support business outcomes without disrupting their way of work, okay? Another example of CREM is site selection. So where can we locate our businesses and the space that we provide to fully support the business, whereas FM here focuses a bit more on performance and is more internally focused. What do we have here? All right, great. Finally, we're done with the theoretical stuff, okay? Let's move on more to the case studies. More examples to sort of try to illustrate what we've been talking about all along. So it'll be a bit less boring. Okay, my question to you today is, if you were the corporate real estate manager for a financial institution that had 8,000 employees across 12 offices in Melbourne, what will you do? All right. The utilization rate of each of these offices is not impressive. At one point in time, they're only utilized, the seats are only occupied up to 40%. All employees are currently housed in an open plan office, okay? So I want you to take a minute or two to think about it. If you're the CRE manager of this financial institution, what would you do differently about this portfolio of real estate that is in front of you, okay? It's not performing very well. It's scattered across Melbourne. We have 8,000 employees, and at one point in time, out of 100 seats, there are only 40 butts on the chairs. Okay, think about what to do. All right, we'll recommence in 1 or 2 minutes. All right, any thoughts so far? Yeah?
Move to hard testing plan, shrink the size of the office, consolidate in one location.
Spot on. Anyone else? No? Okay, that was a really good one. It sort of covered almost all aspects, which is fantastic. The reason why a lot of organizations have these scattered offices is because, you know, they normally start relatively small-ish with one building as their headquarters, and then as the business expands, as they start to increase their number of business units, they don't have enough space to house this, and this is sort of incremental, right? So then they start to lease another office here for another wing, another office here for another business unit, which is why it's sort of very scattered around, okay? Utilization rate of 40% is extremely low. That means that we're spending so much on real estate, but no one's actually using this space, okay? And he suggested hot desking to make them share, right? So we're gonna go and look at what Net would do, okay? So this is similar to what Net encountered in, I think, sort of 2008 until sort of 2012. That was the position that they were stuck in, okay? So let's just talk a bit about Net for a second. A quick case study into Net. So in 2004, they realized that this was a problem. We have too many offices, but we need a solution. So they started testing activity-based working. The difference between activity-based working and hot desking is that instead of just making people share desks in an open plan area, we're going to give them a whole variety of desks. We'll give them a desk, conferencing pods, study booths. So that's basically a very small room that everyone can go into to do their own sort of focus work. We'll give them some collaboration areas with whiteboards, sort of in an open area, meeting rooms of different sizes, a very nice fancy cafe style kitchen, etc., in which they can use for both social gatherings and collaboration. Alright, so that's kind of what they did. They started testing activity-based working. They did not move towards hot desking. So that's where you're still sharing desks, but instead of just sharing desks, we now design the office such that we have a certain work setting for every activity that someone might want to conduct. Alright, so then your office now better supports what people do, because say you might have 4 types of activities that you conduct in a day, whereas he may have 10 types of activities that he conducts in a day. So he would then use a larger variety of work settings compared to you, because he does different type of work. So that's why they started testing. And after a few years of testing, they decided that they're going to move everyone into activity-based working or flexible working, offer them some flexible working policies as well. So things like working from home. And then they had a major change in executives. So they had a new CEO who was willing to try out which wanted to make different organizational changes. So one thing they did was instead of having all our teams working in a silo, because they were previously all working at a different office, we want to now do a matrix organizational structure so that different departments are talking to each other to come up with new ideas and to make things work more smoothly. One thing they wanted to support was real-time working. So say if I wanted to have a meeting with you, I could just pop over and grab you and we could go to maybe one of these open spaces and have a chat, instead of setting up a meeting, booking a meeting room and doing it next week when all I wanted to do was ask you one question. Okay, so that's the real-time working focus they were looking at. Exactly what you said, consolidate their property portfolio to reduce sprawling. So they decided to reduce their, I think, 12 to 20 offices to just 3 major buildings within the city, all sort of 5-minute walking distance from each other. We already covered flexible working, and then focus on culture and health and well-being. So this CEO was actually a catalyst of change, and then all of this fed into constructing 700 Burke Street, which is this building here. Okay. Some CRE roles that were in here. So going back to what we covered earlier, for example, a factor of production here at the NAP Docklands headquarters was producing services and a space for innovation and knowledge creation. As a corporate asset, this was actually leased. It's a long-term lease for I think 15 to 20 years. It used to be off the balance sheet for now, but I think it's on the balance sheet now. In terms of investment, even though they've leased the building, it's quite a major investment to fit out an entire building. All right, it's a lot of money just to fit out the building and integrate that with the base building. They actually worked with the architect of the building itself to make sure that the building design actually integrates with their fit outs. As a commodity, it was developed by Lendlease and is now owned by GPT, I believe. And as a public infrastructure, this was actually the first major development in Docklands. Right? Before that, Docklands was sort of a dead land, contaminated land, no one wanted to touch because it cost too much money. So NAP's projects in Docklands was actually quite groundbreaking to show people what you can do to this contaminated land. Right? So going through some CRE strategies that they incorporated, occupancy cost minimization and flexibility. So now instead of offering everyone a single desk, the employee to workstation ratio is about 0.8 on average, I believe. So like I said earlier, in every organization you have people doing different things, right? Someone working in a call center is going to be doing something very different from someone in marketing, right? Someone who works in a call center will probably sit at their desk 24/7, well, all the hours they're at work. Whereas someone in marketing will probably go in and out of the building several times a day. So people who work in a call center, their employee to workstation ratio is probably 0.9. Whereas someone who works in a marketing department would probably have employee to workstation ratio of about 0.6. So you adjust that based on what the team does. And overall, that reduces your real estate costs because now we're not giving them that many desks and we're reducing wastage. Okay. Another thing with flexibility is that now with activity-based working, previously, remember how every time when you wanted to create a new department, you had to rent a new space in another building because we no longer have space, right? With activity-based working, you can actually push people to increase utilization and squeeze in more departments into the building without actually incurring extra costs, okay? So previously, maybe the contact center had a ratio of 0.9. If you wanted to push them harder, we could push them to work at a 0.8 ratio. All that means is that maybe when one day you show up at work, you may not be able to find a desk, or you may have to go to someone else's department to find a desk, okay? That's not ideal, but the whole point about it is that the organization get to increase their workforce without taking on more real estate. And that's quite fundamental. Another CRE strategy is things like facilitate managerial process and work, so making it more fluid. So one big thing that they had was stairs and bridges across the building, which were purported to, their intention was so that, you know, we bump into people, we have a more fluid work style, we have all these different variety of work settings to support what people do. Promote HR objectives, obviously because the building looks fancy, we have this nice rooftop garden, lots of natural light, people enjoy working in this building. It's also a marketing message because every time we see this building, it reminds us of how fascinating that is, what a cool building, I wish I worked there, right? Promote sales and selling process through superior client experience. Most of you don't know this, but in their new 700, it's not new anymore, in 700 Burke Street, they actually have the ground floor dedicated to their clients. So if you're a NAP client, you can actually walk in there and work there for a couple hours, even if the whole day if you wanted. Just because you're a NAP client, you get to use that space, okay? They also have all of these meeting rooms set up so that their staff can go down and meet their clients directly face to face whenever they wanted to come in and see them, okay? So it's promoting sales and the selling experience by providing people a great client experience. So that's kind of it for our case study on that. But a few other things we wanted to discuss. Why are workplaces increasing the focus? Sorry, I've just got like all these paper messed up. Why are workplaces increasingly the focus of organization? It's just kind of a summary to what we've discussed. Firstly, it's because of the effect of workplaces on employee productivity. If I gave you, 10 different variety of work settings to do what you wanted to do, you now no longer have to conduct a video conference at your open plan desk. You can actually go to an appropriate space to do it. You don't have to do brainstorming at your desk. You can actually go to the right work setting to do it. The next one is to support increasingly varied work profiles of employees and to decrease our costs of of providing spaces as well. And the focus on health and well-being, one big way of doing that is stairs. Providing people step counts. I know that some organizations even have a gym internally or like running tracks internally to help support the health agenda behind their people. Okay, I know ANZ has a very, very premium sort of health center in-house. So now we move on to our discussion of, is location still relevant in a virtual world, right? We're increasingly more attached to virtual reality, mobility, etc. So then the big question is, why do we still need real estate or offices when we can do the same exact thing anywhere in the world, all right? Some people are actually quite against that opinion. So I think this one is Yahoo, where the new CEO, wait, is she a CEO? Yeah, the new CEO actually walked in and she told everyone no one is remote working anymore. Everyone is coming into the office from today onwards because they believe in the physical interaction of people bumping into each other. It sort of creates rapport between each other and it makes you feel connected socially, all right? Which is kind of what every human wants. I'm gonna just quickly run through some sort of office workplaces now, well, just different types of workplaces. Traditional office settings, so cellular offices, that's basically a cubicle, all right? So 3 sort of floor to standing height enclosures. Open plan offices, that's obviously when you can just basically see through the entire office. That started in America. I think it was introduced by some German brother designers known as Bürolandschaft. But that was quite a big attraction at that point in time because then people were more socially connected to each other. You can stand up in your office and look out and find your colleagues immediately. You could yell across the floor plate if you wanted to. Some images of these. This is obviously cubicle land with all your cubicles around you. And Dilbert, you guys are probably too young for that. So this is known as system furniture, where you can sort of reshuffle all of these little walls and install certain shelves, like a system, aka like IKEA, where you can grab something and put it on another. This is your open plan office. So this is kind of what we have in MSD, all right? And then you have these rooms around the open plan offices. Those are normally for higher ranked individuals. So your managers would normally get to sit in there. Some meeting rooms around them. This is obviously your call center. So this is the most common type of workspace globally at the moment. Okay, everyone works in an open plan office. You hear horrible things about open plan office because it's too transparent. I can't focus on my work. I can hear every single gossip that is going on in the office, and it's too noisy even for call centers. The new sort of norm that we're moving towards is activity-based working. Some are actually moving towards hot desking. So some service-driven organizations like Deloitte, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, I believe they were all in hot desking at one point in time. They're increasingly trying to move towards activity-based working. But I know they were quite big on hot desking. So the new norm in workplaces, a lot of head offices want their place to look really, really fancy to support what people do. Very technology savvy, very technology driven. Some different types of non-assigned office workspace are, like I already said, hot desking and ABW. Have you guys heard of co-working? Yeah? So co-working is where you have basically an ABW office, except no one owns it. Well, it's owned by someone, but then 20, 30 organizations share the same space, okay? That's co-working. Another quite interesting one is actually hoteling. So it's not really co-working. That's where organizations actually just have very short leases for just 2 or 3 months. So they might have an organization might have a project come up and they say, look, I have no space to house this project within my organization. Let's just go with hoteling and rent that project team a big meeting room in another building for that 2 or 3 months, all right? So then they're not taking on real estate permanently and they're not taking on real estate that they do not need, okay? Some newer workplace models obviously look very, very fancy. Not sure how much you want to work in here, but at least it looks nicer than a cubicle. Google, obviously very, very fancy. You have this cable car looking thing in the organization. I heard Dyson's really interesting too. You have like the latest product hanging in the center of the office to showcase and tell everyone what we can achieve if we put our minds to it. Yeah, these are just more distributed workplaces. And the question here is, do we even need an office if people who travel all the time just basically work in airports and the suites that they come with? Alright, so we're just gonna take a mini short break to watch a video because I'm sure you guys are all sick of hearing me talk. But we're gonna just quickly watch a video on JLL, from JLL, and then we don't have much more to go after that. Alright,
Morning, Jill.
Good morning, Amy. Where would you like to work today?
The office. What's the weather like today?
The temperature is 18 degrees with a 57% chance of rain. Are you ready to start your day?
Give me 10 minutes.
Okay. How would you like to get there?
I'll walk.
Do you want to ride?
No, I'm good.
Thank you. Careful, Amy. Obstacle ahead. Nearly there. Good time, Amy.
Good morning, Amy. Welcome to JLL. You have one message from William Douglas.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Your first meeting is at 10:30. Please proceed to the elevators. Have a good day.
And you.
Lisa is in today. Lunch?
Good for me.
Invite sent. Have you seen the latest report?
No.
Your coffee will be ready in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
Tip sent. This building uses sensors to make your day more productive. Need a desk?
Maybe later.
Sure. How's the temperature?
It's fine.
Ready to start your meeting with Eloise Dupont?
I am indeed.
I'll let her know.
Bonjour Amy, ça va?
Bonjour, Eloise. Hold on.
Auto-translating.
Vous avez vérifié le document que je vous ai envoyé?
Yeah, all looks great. Thanks very much. Au revoir.
Bonne journée, au revoir, merci.
Are you happy to share your building usage data today? Have a great evening, Amy.
Plan for route home?
Stop navigation.
Navigation off.
Send a message to Tom. Are we still okay for the meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock?
Message sent. Would you like to switch to personal mode?
Yes, please.
Personal mode. Work mode returns 7 a.m. tomorrow.
Confirm.
Have a nice evening, Amy. Enjoy the sunset.
Good night, Jill.
Okay, so this was basically just a video from JLL that sort of illustrates the power of virtual reality technology. What I liked about it is that it showcases you how an activity-based working office works. It shows you how you can use virtual reality and technology to show what work settings are available so that you don't have to waste your time looking for something. Also shows the integration of basically your personal life with work life, trying to create that sort of work-life balance. But at the same time, I find it extremely scary. I'm not sure how many of you have watched that movie called Her. The one where, it's the one where that guy had this sort of virtual assistant and then he got obsessed about her, even though she doesn't exist, and then he fell in love with her, and then they decided to take down the entire software and he fell into depression, etc., right? So that's what I'm kind of reminded about at the same time when I watch this video. So the question is just, how is our workplaces going to look in 10 years, right? How do we integrate everything? Obviously, the building information management system in that would be insane, right? Everything has to be so in sync and so well managed for it to operate that smoothly. All right, we're just gonna quickly spend, 10-ish minutes to look at a case study in facilities management, and then we're done for today, all right? So we're gonna look at Sydney Opera House, all right? All of you should know what it is. Obviously, iconic building, 20th century architectural masterpiece. Most people love it, but at the same time, it costs the government a lot of money to run. Its function is actually as a performance arts center. So I'm not sure how they house that many performances. 1,500 performances per annum. That's basically at least, 5 performances a day, right? Divided by 365. Almost 5 performances a day. I don't know how they do it. That's incredible. But I guess you have separate halls, separate auditoriums, etc. hosts 1,000 non-performance events, all right, and generates about 4.5 million visitors per annum. It contributes $200 million per annum to the economy, contributes $38 million in sales, service, and sponsorship, and the New South Wales government actually spent $19 million on maintaining it and give that amount of grant just for them to run the building. Okay, so that's an insane amount of money, but because it's an iconic building, it generates so much money for the government. That's just their way of giving back. Have any of you been for Vivid Sydney? Not yet, okay. Opera House is basically the core of it, okay. During Vivid Sydney, they basically light up this rooftop with all types of designs. People just stand there for hours. People fly in just to have a look at it, all right. So anyone want to guess what's their core business? I've kind of given you part of the answer. What's their core business? Good, performances, right? What's the other one? Yeah, right? People go there just to visit the building, generates tourism, and gives people a place to perform. Most people would be honored to just perform in the Opera House, in fact. All right, so we're just gonna run through some facility services that they have in place to support the core business, okay? Like we said, one of their core business is performing arts, and there's several services in place to support that. The venue supports actual performances, so like live orchestras, musicals, etc. And these are known as cultural activities. Another thing they do is take visitors through it because it's an iconic sort of building. People would just want to step into it to understand how it's constructed, the history of it, etc. So that's visitor services, amenities, and tourism. The next thing is building and property services, so presentation, preservation of it, and like I said, you know, lighting up that rooftop, etc. It all has to be coordinated by their FM or building services, all right? So these are sort of the three main services that they offer, and this is about as complex as it gets for building operation, okay? These are the different facilities that they have. It's quite insane. So obviously you have to have your theatrical, technical facilities. Security, you don't want someone coming in and putting a bomb in your building or even setting it on fire. Staff and presenter facilities, so people who are performing, they need a room to dress up, apply their makeup, etc. That's what this is here. Visitor facilities, restaurant, catering, etc. Mechanical, electrical, and hydraulic systems, so make sure our toilets work, make sure our air cons, lighting, everything works. Fire services, in case we need to evacuate, is everything, our exit signs, is everything fully working, nothing is blocking our access path. ICT is a big one, to make sure that, you know, these days technology is integrated with everything in their performance, in showcasing the building, the lighting of the building, etc. Imagine if the Opera House did not have any light shining on it at night, all right? You basically can't see it, okay? The building and the site, how do we maintain the building fabric so that it doesn't depreciate beyond its normal schedule? So what the facilities management team in Opera House does is they then rate all of these facilities that they have against these objectives to identify what is a high risk, medium risk, and low risk, okay? So whenever something occurs, they know what risk level it is, and they'll have their procedure in place to deal with it. Okay, so snapshot of Opera House priorities and initiatives. These are a few things that they're trying to work on at the moment. Digital modeling, they're trying to work on a BIM system that we'll look at in the next slide later on. Service procurement, so they're trying to outsource certain jobs but still keep certain things in-house, all right? and they obviously have to monitor that through service level agreements and KPIs. Performance assessment, they'll have a team to assess constantly how we're performing. One thing I thought was very interesting was the building team undertook nearly 27,000 preventative maintenance jobs and nearly 40,000 maintenance jobs in a year. Okay, that's an insane amount of jobs to have to log and to conduct in a year. All right, so you can just kind of imagine how complex it is to run this building. The next thing they're trying to do is they're trying to actually get the building to a 5-star Green Star rating, which is going to cost them a lot of money given that the building was built so long time ago. All right, so they've actually spent quite a while, you know, every year doing some things incrementally. But then one issue with that is because the building is quite old, when you try to modify certain things, you end up making other things go wrong. All right, so they might try to fix something, and then you fix one thing, you have 5 other things to fix after that, and the list just kind of keeps rolling, which is why it's quite complex to modify such a complex, iconic building. And obviously, cultural and heritage significance, how do we respect and preserve it so that it's still as significant as when we first built it, all right? Okay, so the building information management system that they're trying to implement at the moment, I believe it costs millions of dollars, I think 10, 20 million of dollars. They're basically trying to integrate their system even more, incorporate technology in how they operate it so that when anything goes wrong, they can know straight away what's going on. And they have to do this through stages. It's not all at one point in time. I can't quite remember what stage they're up to, but oh, there we go. It'll occur in 2 stages to test the robustness. And then, so they'll do phase 1 first, and then they'll implement the second phase later on, all right? So then they have all of these objectives that they're trying to achieve in their BIM system. They'll test it, and they'll look at the progress to achievement. To what extent have we achieved each of these? Okay? You don't have to fully know everything, it's just an example. Some cultural significance evaluations that they've conducted here. Obviously, one key thing about the Opera House is that sort of sail-looking roof, okay? That's sort of the iconic thing about it. And so that's where the cultural significance really lies in. So they have this entire list of level of cultural significance, A, B, C, D, E, where A is exceptional significance, D is low significance. So they've evaluated the entire exterior. So you can sort of see the roof shelves, exceptionally significant. The boardwalk, also very significant, all right? The lower concourse, I have no idea what's that, but that's high significance, okay? So based on this, what is most probable is that they can't change anything which is exceptional significance. Well, they can modify it to make it better, but they can't completely change it, all right? For example, that roof would always be sail-looking. It's not gonna look edgy anytime soon, all right? So that's kind of it for the FM case study that we kind of looked at. The summary that we have for today is just to emphasize, we hope that out of this you understand the difference between CRE and FM, the different aspects of how we can manage property from an occupier and supplier perspective, help us achieve different organizational purpose. They're both obviously very focused on different things, and they have impacts at different level, portfolio level, individual property level, facility level, etc. Okay, what do we have next? And that's the end. That's the end of today's lecture. Next week we have Chris Haywood coming in, and I believe the week after that we have Bruce Doyle to come in and talk to us about essential service measures. And I believe this is my last big lecture here, but I'll still be here for the subsequent weeks, okay? So do come along and hear from our guest speakers, all right? But otherwise, I'll see you next week, okay?